This is the KBK World Service.
In just a few minutes, we expect US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to talk at a weekly news conference. This comes just 2 days after the House impeached President Donald Trump for the second time. The Senate will now take up the issue and put Mr. Trump on trial. We will join Nancy Pelosi when she begins to speak. Our next guest says the biggest test at the moment is not about Trump. It is whether the Republican Party will assume serious responsibility for keeping the peace in coming days. Senior political analyst David Gergen joins us now from Massachusetts. David, if they are to succeed, what do they need to do in order to ensure the peace in the next coming days?
Well, it would be extremely helpful if Republicans across the board were to speak up and to ask their demonstrators to stay home to make it peaceful. And also, I think if they would be willing to acknowledge that Joe Biden actually is a legitimate president, that would help a lot. But on both fronts, Becky, I'm afraid that the Republican Party has been disappointing. It has not seized the moment to really, and I think it's in some peril as a party. But it does show you, as we look ahead to the impeachment trial for Donald Trump, that there were 10 brave souls on the Republican side who voted against Trump, but 95% of all the Republicans in the House of Representatives voted in favor of Trump on the impeachment, 95%. So you can see how much of an uphill fight it may be in the Senate, where the Democrats would need to get at least 17 Republican senators on board, and that's going to be a tough test for the Democrats.
In order to try and ensure some peace ahead of inauguration, and some peace post-inauguration and at the beginning of Joe Biden's time in office, does a Senate trial at this point help or hinder, David?
Becky, it's an unknown. We're not certain at this moment. It's going to, if they fall short, well short of the 17, I think it's going to be a problem for the Biden presidency. It will diminish the whole effort to get Trump, and I think play into Trump's hands. So yes, I think it bears some risk. The other big issue that Nancy Pelosi will be addressing, I'm sure, momentarily, is when this trial will actually take place. Is she going to push it back several weeks to allow Joe Biden to get his various nominees through the confirmation process, which is so vital in order to get up and get running as an administration early on? Is she going to put it off? But if she puts it off too far, then, tempers cooled, it will be a lot harder to convict, frankly, I think, as time goes on. I may be wrong about that, but I think that's probably true. And so it's a hard choice for Nancy Pelosi. In many ways, you can see how Joe Biden is already struggling. He gave a major speech on the economy last night. Big speech, a $1.9 trillion plan to rescue us from the pandemic. It was mostly aimed at the pandemic. Big deal. Well, it had to compete against the Trump story in every regard. And today, the Biden story is actually a second or third division. And the Trump story is overshadowing everything. That makes it very difficult for Biden to govern, to come out of the, what you want to do as president is use that inaugural address as a springboard to action, to get him to rallying the country behind you, to get the other side to cooperate with you, to get some things done. And in this case, where we have so many crises, to be a new Franklin Roosevelt. We need someone, a president, who can take on crises and battle them with the country behind him. That's going to be hard for Joe Biden the longer this Trump story hangs around.
In a CNN op-ed, David, you wrote, and I quote, Trump's greatest strength is perhaps his ability to convince large swathes of people that what is true is false and what is false is true. There are many in the Republican Party who bid to do the same, even if Trump is out of office. There are still plenty of Congress people with a fake news rhetoric. That is something that Joe Biden will face as he comes into office. How difficult is that going to be to stamp out? It is part of the lexicon these days.
Becky, it's such a good question. Listen, Donald Trump has injected an enormous amount of poison into our political system. And one of the biggest things, and I think it's the most dangerous thing he's done, is he's undermined faith in the election process and convinced so many people on the right that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. As long as that hangs out there, it is very difficult for Biden to govern and to amass, say, 55, 65% support for his domestic initiatives or for his foreign policy initiatives. So it would help so much if the Republicans would back away from this. But frankly, and I hate to make this analogy or this comparison, but frankly, what we're going through on this big lie that Biden is illegitimate, what we're going through is similar to what Germany went through after the First World War. And with the big lie that Germany had lost the war, not on the battlefield, but because people back home, the Jews in particular, pulled the rug out from under the German forces, and it was a stab in the back, as it was called. That stab in the back laid the groundwork for the rise of Hitler. And he would not have become the leader he was were it not for this big lie that survived so long. So I think for those of us in the United States, the fear is this big lie will persist. And it'll be really hard to cleanse our system from it. And I think it's just not good news for America. We're going to make it. We're going to get through this, but it's going to be a tough uphill fight.
And disturbingly, your analysis is so insightful. Disturbingly, we are now learning more and more about the radicalization online of those who have supported this sort of, this big lie. And that's not going to go away. I mean, we were just speaking to a radicalization expert who says, these sort of things start as small groups, as and these things grow. They can be so big and painful going forward. I just wonder, there are many people around the world who have heard from Americans and about America that this is not, this is not America. This isn't who we are. And yet there are, it seems, enough people beginning to say, is this not America revealed at this point? Is it, David?
I think that there's more than one America. And what we're seeing is a piece of America, but we also saw a piece of America down in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, the southern state, known for segregation for centuries, voted for a black man to send him to the Senate. That's also America. So you can't, I don't think we have a coherent America anymore. What we have is a divided America. And we have a populist brand of politics that's growing up in one part of our electorate. And, somebody in Europe are also keeping an eye on that because the far right, the alt-right in Europe has become so popular in places like Poland and Hungary and elsewhere. And at the same time, I think there's the redeeming side of America where in the marches this summer and the last few months on racial equity, you saw a lot of white kids out there. You saw a lot of white Americans marching in solidarity with the black Americans. Sure. So I just think we have to be aware of there are competing factions in the country now. It's not clear which faction is going to prevail. But I do think that we do have a problem of inbuilt racism, and we have a problem of sort of a hooliganism that's coming up. We learned today, prosecutors are saying today about this insurrection and the march on Capitol Hill, storming Capitol Hill. They have found that many of the people who were in those insurrections, in those moments, they came to, quote, to capture and to assassinate. People were actively looking for Nancy Pelosi. She was hiding from those forces. They almost got to her. They wanted to shoot her. So when she comes out today, think about it in that context. That's why so many Democrats are so angry, because they literally thought they came to within an inch of their lives. There were people calling their wives that afternoon and saying, honey, I'll never see you again, I'm afraid.
To capture and assassinate lawmakers was one of the calls. You have been identifying. Thank you, David. In fact, we're gonna stop this interview now because Nancy Pelosi is now in front of the microphone. Let's listen in.
Celebrate and observe Martin Luther King Day Monday. Today is actually Reverend Martin Luther King's birthday, and as we observe it in this extraordinary time, it's important to remember his words, all of them so appropriate, one time or another. Today I remember him saying, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." I particularly am drawn to that phrase because one of my favorites that I have in my office is Pope Paul VI. He said, if you want peace, work for justice. The connection is very clear. Justice is called for as we address the act of insurrection that was perpetrated against the Capitol complex last week. Right now, our managers are solemnly and prayerfully preparing for the trial, which they will take to the Senate. At the same time, we are in transition. With a COVID relief package, President-elect Biden announced last night he is delivering on what he said when he was elected. Help is on the way. His plan makes big, bold, urgent action building on some of our Democratic initiatives in the last Congress, including an increase in direct payments to $2,000, vaccine distribution and testing support in a fair and equitable way, addressing the disparities in access, additional aid for small businesses, funding for state and local governments to protect our heroes' jobs, extension of unemployment benefits, help for renters, for food insecure people, and for our children. As the last jobs report of the Trump administration shows, the need could not be more urgent. Moody Analytics says, this morning, they say that this package, the rescue and recovery package put forth by Joe Biden last night, this package will take us to full employment by 2021, 1 full year earlier than it would occur without it. 2021 versus 2022, 1 full year earlier. In just 5 days, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as President and Vice President of the United States. Following the attack last week on the Capitol complex, there's been unprecedented mobilization of security in the Capitol. I want to express gratitude to our Capitol Police, to the National Guard who are present here to protect our democracy. They have shown great courage. I'm very proud of them, and I was honored to be able to extend gratitude to them in person on behalf of the Congress. We must subject this whole complex, though, to scrutiny in light of what happened and the fact that the inauguration is coming. To that end, I have asked retired Lieutenant General Russell Arnaud to lead an immediate review of security infrastructure, interagency processes, and command and control. The general is a respected leader with experience dealing with crises. As a former Vice Director for Operations, J3, with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his focus was military support to civilian authorities. military support to civilian authorities, and he has experience with the national capital region's security. House leadership has worked with General Arnaud, seen up close and personal his excellent leadership at the time of Katrina. Particularly Mr. Kyburn was the head of our Katrina task force. So he and I and others know full well how fortunate we are that the general has accepted, is willing to do this. Members are moving forward with strong oversight from committees, of course, to have after-action review. There is strong interest in the Congress in a 9/11 type commission, an outside commission, to conduct that after-action review. In the meantime, I'm very grateful to General Arnaud for taking on this responsibility. I find this to be a very emotional time. I've said to the members, we're very passionate to our reaction to this assault on our democracy, on this temple to democracy. We're very passionate about our reaction, but we must be very dispassionate in how we make decisions to go forward for security, security, security. As I see many of the films and the incitement of it all by the President of the United States, but as you see the film, one figure, so many disgusting images, but one figure of a man in a shirt with Auschwitz on it. Auschwitz. Work equals freedom to Auschwitz. This is in this January, 1 year ago. I had the privilege of bringing a delegation in January to Yad Vashem, the Museum of the Holocaust in Israel, to join heads of state. I came as the head of this Congress to observe the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. On the way to Israel, I brought the delegation to Auschwitz and Birkenau. Probably one of the most transformative national security visits that we have made. All of our travel outside the country is about our national security. And so was that. To see the dehumanizing of people that was perpetrated there was so overwhelming. To see this punk with that shirt on and his anti-Semitism that he has bragged about, to be part of a white supremacist raid on this Capitol, requires us to have an after-action review, to assign responsibility to those who were part of organizing it and incentivizing it. In the meantime, we're grateful to General Arnaud for making some recommendations to us on how we can keep our members safe, our staff safe, the people who make the building function, our custodians and the rest, who had to clean up after this insurrectionist mob. But security, we take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, our democracy. And that is what we will do. And we will protect all of those who are here to honor their oath of office. Questions? Yes, ma'am?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can you tell us a couple things on scheduling? Is there any update on when you might send the article of impeachment to the Senate? And secondly, can you tell us how quickly the House might take up President-elect Joe Biden's recovery package?
Well, let me start with that. We're very pleased with what the Vice President put forth last night. I'm eagerly awaiting some of the particulars of the vaccine proposal that will come out this afternoon, because this is a matter of complete urgency.
Right.